Welcome to the Tournament Center here at Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad. I'm Ian Duke. With me is special guest Matt Nass from Team Channel Fireball, and we're here with a very special deck tech for one of the breakout decks this weekend, Black-Green Sacrifice, or Black-Green Aristocrats, if you will. Matt, I'm told you are the creator of this deck. Can you tell us a little bit about how it works?
Yeah, so it's the core strategy is to kind of like old school Rally, Rally the Ancestors combo, use Nantuko Husk and Solaport Cutthroat to either kill your opponent by attacking with Husk and pumping it, or just drain them out with the Solaport. But you don't have Rally anymore, unfortunately. So if your creatures die, they're dead forever, barring a Liliana.
Barring a Liliana, right? I was going to say.
But it still actually works pretty well. And then it also uses Collected Company to get tutor for those two cards and get some other creatures into play to burn them out.
So it's kind of a token, sacrifice, life drain type deck with Collected Company as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Very cool. So let's take a look at the first slide here. We've got a couple of one-drops here. Loam Dryad is a card I certainly was surprised to see show up in the constructed portion this weekend. Tell us about this as an addition to the deck.
Yeah, obviously this card isn't as good as Birds of Paradise or Llanowar Elves or any of the one-drops that have been made in the past. They tend not to put those in Standard anymore. But Loam Dryad is still pretty good. You usually have a one-drop or a two-drop to play, and this deck isn't really about attacking, so it works pretty well. And
Blister Pod, of course, a creature that works great with sacrifice effects, as I'm sure we'll see later on, right?
Yeah.
So on to slide number 2, we have a couple more creatures here. Elvish Visionary, Duskwatch Recruiter, a new addition from Shadows over Innistrad, and Cryptolith Rite, which is a card that has really impressed me so far this weekend.
Right.
So yeah, walk us through these.
So Elvish Visionary is just kind of a body that comes with a card, not too surprising. You can sack it to Husk, do all the stuff that you can do with any creature. Duskwatch Recruiter is really sweet new addition. When you have Cryptolith Rite in play, which makes all your creatures tap for a mana of any color, you can activate Duskwatch Recruiter multiple times a turn, digging for more creatures, and just develop a giant board presence.
Yeah, it really gives nightmares to control decks, right? Where you can just keep refilling your hand and live through something like a Languish or a Kozilek's Return. So yeah, great new addition.
Also really good in board stalls. Like against Band Company, you both have a bunch of creatures out, neither player can attack. Drawing 3 cards a turn is just really powerful.
And yeah, talk to me about Cryptolith Rite. This was a card that was pretty scary for us from an R&D standpoint. Just its open-ended mana generation can lead to really explosive draws. How did you find this card? How did it work its way into the deck in testing?
Sam Black was actually playing a bunch of decks with this card since we were testing with Team Ultra Pro. And so he was testing like some green-white decks with Secure the Waste in this card and some other things like that. And we tried it at one point in this green-black deck, but we didn't have Duskwatch Recruiter, so we actually decided it wasn't good enough, and then later went back to it with Duskwatch Recruiter and found it was legitimately great.
Very cool, very cool. Let's take a look at the next slide. So here we've got Solaport Cutthroat. This is a staple in these kind of sacrifice decks, a card we've seen before in Rally. Catacomb Sifter, great at making tokens. Nantuko Husk, this is a card that we saw in the Rally deck earlier, but it's just so important to this deck, it really bears talking a little bit more about. Tell us about how important Nantuko Husk is to the deck.
Yeah, so Nantuko Husk lets you sacrifice a creature at any time, which is unbelievable. You can, sack to Solaport. If you have enough creatures in play, you can just sack all your creatures to Solaport and drain them out at once. It flips Liliana over there. But it also is just a creature that gets to very high power. For example, you can play turn 2 Solaport Cutthroat, turn 3 Nantuko Husk, and then turn 4 play like a Blister Pod and a Liliana, and it just adds up to 20 damage.
So there's probably a fair number of games where you're just attacking for 1 billion with Nantuko Husk for the win.
Forcing them to chump block, which is also great.
Yeah, that sounds really important. Now, yeah, Liliana's a really interesting card to me. This is a card that's been around for a while. I feel like people have tried it out in these decks, but it may be proved not to be quite good enough in the old Standard. What's made it sort of come to the forefront now and be a good fit for the deck?
Yeah, I didn't play this in Rally combo when I played it before because it was double black and it was a 4-color deck. And the power level of that deck was just a little bit higher than this one. So Liliana is really sweet.
A little bit about the rotation, sort of lowering the power level of Standard in some places and letting this one rise up.
The way this deck plays is a little bit different. It has more it's really good with Blister Pod to just return it for only 1 loyalty. And yeah, just the games play out a little bit differently.
Awesome. So yeah, let's take a look at what's coming up next. So Collected Company, of course, a card we've seen tons of this weekend.
Yeah.
Seems awesome in this deck.
Yeah, this is the best card in the deck. I think this deck has more Company decks than the average Company deck even. The only misses are Company and Cryptolith Rites.
Wow.
So, and Husk, Liliana, Catacomb Sifter. Zulaport, all the good cards.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of potential for blowout, just finding an extra Zulaport Cutthroat or an Antuco Husk or something like that when your opponent's not expecting it.
This is the best card in the deck.
Awesome card. I'm sure we'll see more of it this standard season. What do we have coming up next? Westvale Abbey. So here's another breakout card from Shadows over Innistrad. It's been really impressive so far in this deck. We watched Luis on camera earlier today. How good is this card? What does it do for you?
Yeah, you don't really activate the second ability very often, the pay a life to make a human, but it could come up against the control deck potentially. But the third ability, where you sacrifice to flip it and it becomes a 9/7 flying haste indestructible, is just bonkers. And with Catacomb Sifter, Collected Company, Liliana making extra tokens, it's not that hard to get to 5, and just a lot of 1-drops and 2-drops. It's not that hard to get to 5 creatures.
Yeah, when I've seen this card on camera, it's almost like a free enchantment that says if you can get to 5 mana and 5 creatures, you win the game. Almost. Like it's an exaggeration, but the card is really that powerful.
And another thing to note is that you can get to 5 mana without 5 lands. If you just have Cryptolith Rights, you can even do it on 2 lands potentially. Just all your creatures tap to sack themselves.
That's awesome. Next slide. So here's just going through your mana base real quick. Looks pretty straightforward, just a 2-color deck, a nice break from what we had in the previous standard, right?
Yeah.
Any comments on the mana base here? I guess Hissing Quagmire is a pretty interesting creature.
I have to give a lot of credit to Sam Black for the mana base. When we were testing the deck in the past, we had a lot more tap lands, like Foul Orchard, or we tried Evolving Wilds at some point, which is, unless you're playing Tireless Tracker, just a worse Foul Orchard. But it turns out that this deck just wants to be fast and play its cards as early as possible. It doesn't want to take a turn off, and so just playing Hissing Quagmire is a must because it's also counts as a creature sometimes, which is relevant, and you still need a little bit of fixing. But I like the low tap land count.
And I imagine having a card like Loam Dryad can really help you go down on total number of lands and up on untapped lands as well. Right?
Loam Dryad and Cryptolith Rights both make any color. So
awesome. So there you have it. That's the Black-Green Sacrifice deck, as we're calling it, designed by Matt Nass and Team Channel Fireball. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ian Duke with Matt Nass, signing off from the Tournament Center.